Vietnam. MiG aircraft patrol for 10 hours above the jungle. A furious aerial dogfight erupts. Hell itself has begun. The pilot can't see him. Where is he? He's on your tail. The pilots are stretched to their breaking point. Brake right. Do you hear me? It was terrifying. American aviation was under assault from an enemy fighting by their own rules. If this war spiraled out of control, it could trigger World War III. America needed a hero, someone ready for unconventional actions, capable of destroying the enemy. Robin Olds was exactly what they needed, a battle-hardened pilot possessing all the necessary qualities. This lone fighter became the architect of the most daring aerial mission of the Vietnam War. This is suicide, they said. Air Aces of War, Vietnam Dogfight, July 1966. Roger, we have green. What began as a conflict was escalating into full-scale war. Despite the significant technical superiority of American bombers, North Vietnamese aviation was shooting them down effectively using guerrilla tactics known as hit and run. Losses were mounting high. Morale was devastatingly low in the heart of the war, in the skies above Vietnam. In August 1966, Colonel Robert Olds arrived at Yuma Air Base in Thailand. The summer heat was oppressive and intense. He submitted his papers. The food was strange, the water tasted terrible, mosquitoes drove everyone insane, combat operations were in full swing, people were being killed, the officers' club was a grim place. In July alone, several dozen American pilots had been shot down. The pilots of the wing were in incredible confusion. Every day, they were losing people. The aircraft were in terrible technical condition. The missions were extremely complex. That was the situation in August-September when Robin appeared. Colonel Robin Olds was a classic hero. Strong-willed, courageous, fearless. He had played football for his team, was married to a movie star. In every way, he resembled Clark Gable, like a movie actor. Olds left the country commanding the air base in England for the blood and sweat of the front lines. He was supposed to be promoted to brigadier general, but as generals aren't allowed to fly combat missions, he thought, only not me, I want to fly. Robin wasn't built to sit behind a desk. First, he wouldn't fit behind it, and second, you can't fly a damn desk. His mission was to understand why so many pilots were dying and help restore air superiority. Dan Robin, a young pilot from Mississippi serving at the Thailand base, had no idea what was about to happen. When Olds arrived, he was beside himself, asking what kind of organization this was. Olds knew that to revive his battered unit, he needed to earn the pilot's respect. The pilot sat there thinking,
I understand your reservations.
Fly
this mission is crucial,
and we'll never see you again. Olds said, I don't know what's going on here, boys, but I'll figure it out. I'll fly as Green 16. Green 16, second lieutenant of the British Strike Officer, trying not to die in his first dogfight. He pointed around the room.
This mission requires absolute precision and unwavering courage.
Captain Stone wasn't going to say it out loud, but the phrase just slipped out. Yeah, we'll see. Olds literally drilled him with his gaze. Stone tried to justify that he didn't mean to say it. Eventually, Olds smiled with the corner of his mouth. What's your name, son? Captain John Stone, sir. Green 16 flies tomorrow at 3. The last time Olds had flown a piston fighter was during World War II. Now he was undergoing accelerated training on the most modern aircraft in the U.S. Air Force, the F-4 Phantom. The colonel never stayed away from the guys. Dan Stone remembers his new commander well. Olds always strived to set a personal example. If he wasn't capable of doing something, he never asked others to do it. Within 2 or 3 weeks, he was already ahead, showing better than any other pilot in the wing. His mission, escorting bombers over North Vietnam. He needed to personally understand what was going wrong. He took risks, personally leading the sorties, something unheard of. Robin was what he needed. Olds was the right pilot, because flying was in his DNA. His father's mother died when Robin was 4, and he was raised by his father, an outstanding pilot from World War I. He had no doubts that he should become a fighter pilot. In 1943, Olds completed his studies at West Point and was sent to Europe for war against Nazi Germany. At 23 years old, he became part of an elite club. Robin became the first ace in his unit in England. By the end of the war, he had 12 victories credited to him. 23 years later, veteran pilot Robin Olds was sent to Vietnam to revitalize the 8th Tactical Fighter Wing. The unit's main task was protecting the high-speed strike aircraft F-105 Thunder Chief, or simply Thuds, which North Vietnamese aviation was shooting down with extreme effectiveness, exploiting the slightest miscalculations in American tactics. In July '66, the Americans lost 43 aircraft, an astronomical figure. These losses seriously affected pilot morale. This definitely affected people severely. Everyone would go to the club and get drunk, talking about the dead. The next day, they had to fly again. Pilots started thinking about the numbers. Will they survive? They were losing about one per day. The math was simple. They wouldn't survive if something didn't change. The high losses were partly due to the intensification of the air war, which was part of Operation Rolling Thunder. Operation Rolling Thunder was the code name for missions over North Vietnamese territory, involving massive bombing of transport facilities, bridges, railways, and fuel storage sites. The operation's goal was to destroy the supply lines of Viet Cong fighters in the south and force North Vietnamese leadership to the negotiating table. The Americans expected them to say uncle and surrender. Instead of crying uncle, the Vietnamese struck back. The North Vietnamese proved to be worthy adversaries of the USA. They chose tactics that exploited vulnerable spots in the American approach. One of these vulnerable spots was the predictability of American bomber raids. 405 seconds would go, followed by 4 Phantoms, and so on. They struck in the morning and again in the evening. This was one of their problems. The Vietnamese could set their watches by these raids. They had an advantage because ground radar operators supported them, reporting the locations of American aircraft. The North Vietnamese Air Force strategy was simple: hit and run. They were like wolves in a pack, circling, waiting for the American strike group to approach. Shotgun says, Tron, they're at your 7 o'clock. The pilot doesn't see where he is. They would throw 1 or 2 MiGs into the thick of the aircraft, fire a missile hoping to shoot down at least one. Approaching, break with reverse. The thuds were very fast, but with full bomb loads, they were completely unmaneuverable. MiG-21 or MiG-17, they had no chance. The MiGs won, so pilots had to drop their bombs, and that's all the Vietnamese needed because it meant disrupting the American raid. 4 Phantoms approached from behind. When Olds appeared, his F-4 seconds made the MiGs prefer to leave rather than risk valuable aircraft in aerial dogfight. They're leaving, let's go after them. The obvious solution to Olds' problem was to destroy North Vietnamese airfields, but his hands were tied. They couldn't hit Hanoi and Haiphong because if Russians or Chinese supporting North Vietnam were hit, World War III would begin. The situation for Olds and his men seemed hopeless. The enemy guides you, but you can't destroy him. It's like fighting with one hand tied. It's incredibly discouraging. They're being shot down, and they can't do anything about it. The pilots had no idea what they were dealing with. Damn bureaucrats. The war was being conducted from Washington at a distance of 16,000 to 19,000 kilometers, and this was a stumbling block for the pilots. What did the politicians know? The pilots just wanted permission to do what they thought was necessary. There's a famous expression from President Johnson: without my permission, they won't bomb an outhouse. The strict framework for conducting combat operations put Olds and his men in a dangerous position. This World War II ace had to find an unconventional solution. He had no idea that Dan Stone and a small group of other pilots were working on the same thing. There was a lot that...
All right, let's go over this one more time.
Stone learned that every day they received intelligence data that nobody was analyzing. It contained a bunch of valuable information. Someone just had to spend time studying it. Every day they would sit down, light up, and study the actions of other air groups and themselves. The guys from under the hill, their commander, soon found them. One day he was walking around the units and came to them. What are you doing here? Trying to prepare better. He said something needed to be done about these losses. They were simply unacceptable. Stone agreed with him, and since he was sometimes extremely unrestrained, he said he had an idea. During MiG attacks on Vietnamese targets, pilots retreated as soon as Phantoms came to help. The Americans lost them. They tried to avoid encounters with F-4 seconds because the Americans had comparable maneuverability. They could shoot them down. They wouldn't engage in dogfight. Stone's daring idea was a 20th century Trojan horse. F-4 Phantoms should pretend to be strike thuds, lure MiGs into open sky, and shoot them down in aerial dogfight. This intrigued Olds. He selected a team to bring the plan to life. Olds told Stone he chose him for several reasons. He needed to go down the corridor, find a small office where several of his buddies were sitting, and they must plan a combat operation. Yes, sir. Olds named his top secret mission Operation Bolo. What are you doing here? The colonel sent me. What are you planning? The operation is called Bolo. Stone couldn't believe it.
Are you sure about this, Dan?
A captain and a major.
I'm afraid so.
They were nobody, and they were going to plan a mission. This was very serious business. This wasn't shooting down a couple of planes. The operation's goal, if successful, was to destroy the North Vietnamese Air Force. The trust was simply incredible. Problem number 1, making the enemy believe that F-4 Phantom aircraft were F-105 Thunder bombers. Phone 105 seconds flying from Thailand went at a certain altitude, followed a certain route, refueled in the air at certain points. Deviations from this system were rare. They tried to reproduce all the actions of the 105 seconds, even their radio communications. They had their own lexicon, and the team had to use it. Clear the base, this phrase went with music. They had to say going green when green lights came on. They also carried electronic jamming devices, pods whose purpose was to counter SAM missiles with radar guidance. The pod would blur the enemy radar image so they couldn't distinguish individual targets. They hoped that the large jamming spot moving toward them would be mistaken by enemies for 105 seconds. Throughout the fall of 1966, Robin Olds and a small group of pilots refined their top-secret plan to destroy Vietnamese aviation. This wouldn't be an easy task. Excellent pilots trained by Russians sat in mid-cockpits. Additionally, the Americans would face a devastating barrage of Soviet and Chinese-made SAM missiles. North Vietnam was divided into zones with threat levels from 1 to 6. The higher the number, the greater the risk. Light zones were 1, 2, 3. Hanoi was number 6. It was believed pilots needed to complete 10 missions to this zone to learn how to survive, but they lost a bunch of pilots and nobody ever reached 10 sorties. Pilots flying to Hanoi had 6, 7, sometimes 3 sorties. Going to Zone 6 was always unpleasant. There was a feeling like something was breaking inside because the outcome was unknown. The Hanoi area was the most well-defended region in the world, a deadly combination of all means, from farmers with rifles and spears to SAM complexes with radar guidance. When guys went on such a mission, it was assumed they'd lose someone, at least one. The pilots asked Olds which group they fly in. He answered, "They won't know until the time comes." This way, Olds ensured that mission planning wasn't affected by pilots' preferences or fears, since this might be their last. He turned to them and said words they would never forget. "We must plan everything as if it all concerns us personally. When you plan a mission and know you'll participate in it yourself, the approach is completely different. You do everything thoroughly. How many of their people can they send if each group will have losses? How many aircraft will the enemy put in the sky? How to organize the flight of all machines? For each flight, they worked out everything to the smallest detail. It was large-scale work. Despite its enormous firepower, the F-4 Phantom was inferior to the versatile MiG in close dogfight. The F-4 Phantom was forced to fight a war it wasn't designed for. In the late 50s and early 60s, it was believed that close air combat in the style of previous wars was a thing of the past. The aircraft was supposed to fly fast, high, and carry missiles. The Phantom's standard armament consisted of missiles with radar guidance systems and heat-seeking warheads, plus additionally 7,454 kilogram bombs. The aircraft could carry any weapon and perform any tasks, but the Phantom had one serious drawback. The main disadvantage of the F-4 was the absence of a cannon. The enemy pilots knew that the closer they got to the Americans, the less chance the Americans had of shooting them down. Radar and heat-guided missiles weren't designed for shooting at maneuverable targets. Some means for close combat was needed. They operated at medium and long distances. If you have a cannon, Sidewinder, and Sparrow,
We have a
all
system
3 zones are
malfunction.
covered.
I repeat,
But without a cannon,
system
pilots are vulnerable
malfunction.
if the enemy is closer than 900 meters. There's nothing left that can hit. If you fire a Sidewinder, the missile will fly past without having time to guide. MiGs were not only better adapted for maneuverable close dogfight, but compared to them, the F-4 had another disadvantage. Observers could spot an F-4 from about 24 kilometers away. Phantoms left a thick black exhaust trail, while the 105 didn't. This worried the American pilots a lot because as soon as MiG pilots took to the air, they'd noticed the smoke trails. There were many disadvantages, but Olds could use some. The MiG-21 was, as they say, short-legged. It couldn't fly long, then it needed to land.
Limited time.
How long could they stay in the
reach.
air? 17 minutes, 45, 21 minutes, 10 more. So they could only stay in the air a little over an hour. The MiG's time limitations gave Olds an advantage. Within an hour after takeoff, enemy aircraft would have nowhere to land. The plan was to make them take off and not let them land until they were either shot down or ran out of fuel. For this, strike flights would take off at 5-minute intervals. In total, there were 7 waves. In this case, while one flight refueled, another would take its place, then another, pretending to be Thunder Chiefs. Phantoms would fly in groups of 4 fighters each. If they were lucky, the MiGs would take to the air and rush into the deadly trap. If they tried to escape to Chinese territory, they'd be intercepted by a second group approaching from the east, led by World War II and Korean War veteran Robert Ettinger. The eastern group would come along the shore and shoot them like clay pigeons. This top-secret plan looked great on paper. Now Olds had to get official approval and implement it. Stone was sure nothing would come of it. The plan was too good, too ambitious, they'd never approve it. Olds went to Saigon directly to the higher command. This World War II ace said, "I want to destroy North Vietnamese aviation, and here's how I plan to do it." Robin Olds' role was key. He had enough charisma, character, like a real movie star, and he handled the task excellently. He returned from Saigon.
We got the green light.
Boys, we got the green light. The mission is approved. It's scheduled for New
All
Year's
right,
Day,
listen up.
January 1st,
This is Operation
1966 was ending,
Bolo.
and Olds called a sudden meeting where he revealed the Operation Bolo plan. Bolo, a classic
We're
mission with
flying
luring
into
and
the best
substitution.
defended airspace
Everyone
in the
thought,
world,
it can't be,
pretending
we're
to be
flying to the best
thugs.
defended zones in the world pretending to be thugs? What's he talking about? This is suicide. We'll fly in 7 flights with 5-minute intervals. Finally, Olds revealed which pilots were assigned to which flight, and each group received its unique call sign. Phantoms from Uban would be Olds. Those from Da Nang 4, from Uban again, Rambler. If the call sign was an animal named bear, raccoon, it meant it was
All right,
some of their
listen
guys.
up, gentlemen and ladies.
Pilots just had to listen.
Our mission is
and it
critical,
became clear
so
what was
pay
happening.
close attention
I'll lead
to
the first group,
details.
Olds announced. For obvious reasons, the mission would be led by Commander Robin Olds. His wingman would be Ralph Wetterhahn. Wetterhahn's task as wingman was to spot MiGs and guide the leader so he could shoot them down. If he couldn't, then Wetterhahn would shoot them down. The first deputy commander led the second group under the code name Ford. His wingman would be Dan Stone. Stone's job was to cover the formation. So, gentlemen, time to make your mark. A battle awaits you. All 3 Rambler groups were to gather at Phuc Yen, the main MiG base north of Hanoi. The pre-flight briefing room buzzed with excitement. It was simply incredible. An absolutely new, beautiful mission. They couldn't wait to get started.
This is
Finally,
what we have been
they'd be
waiting
fighting
for.
aircraft
The
instead of
moment
flying
that we have
around waiting
trained
to be
for.
shot down. The hour was set for 1 p.m., the 1st of January 1967. It was New Year's Eve. Parties were canceled. Everyone received their orders and waited for takeoff. Around 8 p.m., word came that the mission was canceled due to bad weather. Weather was the most important part of the entire mission. To shoot down aircraft, pilots needed to see them. If they went under clouds, they couldn't handle the task. The mission was postponed to the next day, January 2nd. Olds used the unexpected break as an excuse to let his people blow off steam. He expected all of them in the evening, and they began celebrating. The 2nd of January 1967, Uban Air Base, Thailand. The bad weather had passed, and Operation Bolo was beginning. Olds reminded everyone of Clark Gable,
All right, let's
not
fly
just sitting
together
at a
and get
desk
this
giving
done.
orders. He'd be with them, lead them into battle. This was very impressive and motivating. Confidence was the most important thing. None of the pilots in Olds' unit had yet participated in close dogfight. Olds himself hadn't participated in aerial dogfights since World War II, 23 years ago. This was the most exciting mission. They were supposed to do what they were trained for, shoot down aircraft. Everyone felt like real heroes. The 2nd of January, 1967. They were ready. Teeth sharpened, blood boiling, pilots strapped in each click brought them closer to the target. Safety belt, anti-G suit. Start the engine. Pilots were busy checking systems and missiles, focused on what needed to be done in the remaining minutes before takeoff. All 4 aircraft taxied to the arming area at the end of the runway. The pilot raises both hands so they're visible. When the technician sees the pilot won't pull the trigger, under each aircraft, each missile has a safety pin with a red flag. He pulls them out and clears for takeoff. The first group flew first. Stone sat in the aircraft right behind Robin Olds' machine. Olds released the brakes. 2 streams of flame burst over the strip. Heat shimmer rises from the pavement. The aircraft takes off, and now it's the next pilot's turn. Increase thrust and feel yourself pressed into the seat. Afterburner engages, and they're flying. Operation Bolo had begun. What's happening? Is this really happening? It was simply incredible. Almost 500 kilometers east of Olds, another wing of Phantoms took to the air, led by Colonel Tungi. They were to cut off the MiG's escape route to China. If the enemy tried to flee, they'd run into the eastern route. Repeating Thunder Chief behavior before entering enemy territory, Olds refueled at the same altitude and in the same place. Tankers were waiting for them over northern Laos, the Da Nang guys over the South China Sea.
Connection confirmed.
After an hour and a half,
Transferring fuel
Olds'
now.
group reached Hanoi and its main airbase. The skies were empty. No MiGs he was expecting were visible anywhere. Where the hell are they? They should have taken off by now. Dead silence. Frightening dead silence. What they were doing was real madness. Maybe the Vietnamese knew this was a trap. Maybe now their own trap would slam shut. There was only one chance. If the Vietnamese didn't take the bait again, they could only circle, burning precious fuel and wait. Back north, they thought this would be interesting, and what would happen? They'd been flying there too long, giving the enemy on the ground time to figure out what to do. When Olds turned toward Hanoi again, the first MiG shot out of the clouds. There's one. And here appears a silver aircraft with swept wings. For the first time in their lives, the American pilots saw enemy pilots who were going to kill them so close, and their task was to kill the enemy. They'd never forget that moment. Layer after layer of clouds were broken by more and more MiGs. The Vietnamese had taken the bait. Lead, I see a MiG at 10 o'clock. He's mine. Robin banked right directly at the MiG he was looking at, fired Sidewinder missiles. In a sharp turn, missiles simply couldn't turn so sharply miss. Another MiG approached Olds from behind. Olds, you have a MiG on your tail. He was trapped between two MiGs. The situation couldn't be worse. What to do now? Someone's going to be killed. Decisions needed to be made. Wetterhawn's task was to protect his leader. He fired the first missile. It came off, but he didn't see it anymore. Probably just failed. He pressed the trigger again. The missile came off and appeared in his field of view. Right by the book, he tracked his entire path to the MiG. For some time, the enemy aircraft continued flying. Wetterhawn thought he missed. The missile hit the target, and a powerful explosion followed. The aircraft spun and plummeted to Earth.
One MiG down.
Excellent, Wetterhawn. One MiG down. Old switched attention to the others, then made a sharp maneuver directly toward the sun, came out of a climb in a slow roll, and ended up right on another MiG's tail. The last time he participated in aerial dogfight was over 20 years ago, but Robin Olds did everything right. It was close dogfight, sharp turns, maneuvering, one-on-one battle. In the thick of the aerial dogfight, the next wave of fighters arrived under the code name Ford. Ford leader, break right, MiG at 5 o'clock. Stone saw his leader being pursued by a MiG. There was no response. They continued flying. Ford leader, how do you copy? Break right. Stone thought maybe the pilot didn't understand his call sign. Stone, break right. Stone didn't understand what was happening. The enemy was his target. He took position between his leader and the MiG. When the enemy pilot saw him and rolled to the left wing while Stone rode to the right, they converged canopy to canopy. Stone could see the enemy pilot's oxygen mask. In aerial dogfight, the main thing was for the opponent to pass in front of you or fly by. So Stone just waited for the enemy's mistake. He did a barrel roll, the enemy changed the direction of his turn, and that became his last mistake. Stone armed the missile, pressed the trigger, it flew away at bullet speed and blew the MiG to pieces. Olds and his pilots from the group code named Rambler joined the dogfight. Stone looked down and saw two MiGs climbing. Without hesitation, he began a gentle left turn to drop the aircraft's nose, pressed the trigger to fire the first missile. Sidewinder just fell off the mount. Then Stone pressed the trigger 2 more times. The second missile aimed directly at the MiG, and it exploded. Stone had no time to celebrate. More MiGs that couldn't get airborne earlier were now in the air. They were everywhere. Second one at 2 o'clock. Pilots were stretched to the breaking point. Screaming filled the airwaves. I hear an F4. I don't know your call sign. Break right! You have a MiG on your tail! One pilot noticed a MiG-21. It was turned belly toward him. He could see red stars. The enemy was shooting at him with a 23mm cannon. Tracers were fired so pilots could see where they were shooting, but these tracers seemed enormous, bigger than a basketball. They were streaking across the sky above the canopy. It felt like they punched through the canopy. The pilot thought he was hit. Basketball-sized projectiles whistled over the canopy. What to do? He evaded to spoil the enemy's aim, entered a steep turn flying at 1,040 kilometers per hour. The G-forces were terrible. Coming out of the maneuver in reverse, and the MiG was gone, it disappeared. Realizing their aircraft had fallen into a trap, headquarters ordered an immediate retreat. Ground controllers ordered enemy pilots to take cover in the clouds, and they did exactly that. Withdrawing in pilot language, this means get the hell out of here. Fuel was almost at 0 and the Phantoms headed home. Within minutes of the dogfight ending, word reached ground personnel. The American pilots descended over the airfield, and 3 of them did victory rolls. Everyone was meeting them, there was a whole crowd. When they got out after landing, Olds stood in his seat and showed the victory gesture. Olds and his wing shot down 7 enemy aircraft, almost half of all MiG-21 seconds available to North Vietnamese Air Force. For months, this disrupted their plans. It couldn't have been better. They didn't lose a single aircraft and gave the enemy a good thrashing.
It was a long one, but
during the mission, did everything go as you expected? No, we missed a few.
Everyone did their part.
Everything went magnificently. I'm damn glad, Captain.
Colonel
This was your
Olds, how
first
does it
major
feel to be
battle.
back?
What do you feel?
Not to a bet.
It was great.
Good.
The result
Good
is
story.
excellent. Everything as we
It's good
planned,
to be back,
as we hoped.
on solid
Excellent.
ground.
The fact that they shot down half
This
of North
operation
Vietnam's
requires
first-line MiGs
precision
restored fighting
and full
spirit to
commitment
all
from
fighter
each of
pilots
you.
in Southeast Asia. And America had its hero, the man who could pull off this operation, Colonel Robin Olds. Robin Olds was the best commander anyone had known or heard about. He had everything necessary, the ability to persuade, knowledge, and the courage to go into battle himself instead of returning to safe office work. Olds chose to stay in the sky. A standard tour was 100 missions. After 100 combat flights, pilots were sent home. But he didn't want to be sent home. Around mission 86 or 87, here was a guy from World War II with every medal you could possibly get.
So glad
What did he want to
you're
prove?
safe.
Nothing. That was the whole beauty of it. He just flew. Finally, Olds' time in Vietnam came to an end. He had just completed his final mission and was heading home for the
We need to
best
confirm
wing
the
in the
coordinates
world.
for the next phase.
His son later said the best moment of his father's
Are we
life
ready for
was
this
when his
flight?
men carried him on their shoulders after
We
his
have to
last
be.
mission, which was number 152 for him. For the men of the 8th Tactical Fighter Wing, Colonel Robin Olds was a special person, a commander who did more than any single pilot usually did, and usually did it better. Not only was he an exceptional pilot, but for those he fought with, he longed in the mix. He returned to America to his family. Olds left Vietnam in September 1967, returned to Washington, and was immediately taken to President Johnson's office. The president sat him down and asked, "Colonel, tell me how you think things are going in the war."
I missed you too.
Olds replied, "Sir, with all due respect to the commander-in-chief, I'll say, get us out of this damn war." The president responded, "Son, how should I do that?"
I assure you,
And Olds
sir,
said,
every
"It's
angle
simple,
has
sir.
been
Just
considered."
win it." Robin wasn't like everyone else. He was a leader who rejected conventional methods, who did his job while never fully following the rules. He always operated on the edge. Robin was an enigma. He was the bravest person anyone had ever met. He was one of a kind. He was a movie hero in real life, proving it again and again. But this wasn't 2 hours of film. This was Robin Olds. General Olds retired from the U.S. Air Force in 1973, 30 years after graduating from West Point. He died in 2007 at age 84. Throughout the skies of Vietnam, in the most intense aerial dogfights of the war, one name would be remembered above all others: Robin Olds, the ace who turned the tide when American pilots needed it most.